Welcome, friends and fellow passionate entrepreneurial teachers. My guest today is someone that I have wanted to chat with for a while and find out more about her story. And the beauty of having your own podcast is you get to pepper interesting people with questions in a socially acceptable way. So I get to grill my guest today on all of the things that I've wondered about. And I am joined today by a fellow entrepreneurial teacher and another anti-netter. We're a really cool crew of people over here. Victoria Crowder. And Victoria is a self-defense company owner and a network engineer living on a cattle ranch in Missouri. Already, so many questions. And as a serial entrepreneur, she's run or owned businesses in the fashion industry, nutrition and wellness, and firearms training. She's also taught writing at the college level for 16 years. She's currently working on her first novel in a trilogy and a nonfiction book called Zettelkasten for Fiction, Where Imagination Finds Order. So much cool stuff in there. But for a quick framing question for our audience, in your words, Victoria, what do you love to teach and to share with others?
Um, well, I would have to say I learned pretty early on that one of my superpowers is I'm good at taking something that's relatively complex or difficult or interesting. I'm good at breaking it apart into pieces that I can then share and help somebody else understand and get grounded in whatever that thing is. So I learned from the time I was really probably 8 or 9 that teaching was one of my superpowers. I recalled this when I was thinking about this podcast. The earliest thing I ever remember teaching, I grew up in Martin City, Missouri, teeny tiny little town. And I don't know if you can Google this or not. I should have, but there was a tornado that basically flattened our town. We lived in a basement house, like peeled the roof off, the whole 9 yards. And I had two cousins that are one's 3 years and one's 5 years younger than me. So they were pretty little and terrified. The first thing I remember teaching is I pulled out my little chalkboard. And of course, on the news, we had the news on and they're talking all about the tornado and all this and that. And I broke down for them how the tornado had already moved past. And so the danger was gone. So they didn't have to be afraid anymore. And they were like, oh, okay. So that's the first thing I ever remember teaching. And from there on, it's just been a lifelong journey.
Awesome. All right, that is the lifelong journey is what I want to hear about next because I'm excited to hear this story. And I have so many questions for you, but I don't actually know what order to ask them in because I have no idea how all of these pieces of your life history kind of line up chronologically and what led to what. So you just shared, I was going to ask you where you were born, if you've always been in Missouri. But I was curious, where you grew up. She kind of just told us, but also how all these various career explorations led you to what you're doing today on a cattle ranch with an interesting mix of things that you have going on. So give us the lay of the land.
Okay. Um, so if one thing would provide a thread of continuity through my entire life, it's teaching. That's what I love to do. My nature is that I'm a writer, and I was recruited out of the ninth grade into high school onto the debate squad, and that's probably the one thing that has informed everything I do. It was hammered into me to be a good communicator. And through the process of going through high school, and then I was recruited onto the UMKC debate squad and debated for them for 5 years at the national level. That's something that was just ingrained in me. As a competitor and as a speaker, learning to break something apart, formulate an argument, present it in a persuasive way, defend your position. Those were things that from the ninth grade on were just part of me. So I grew up in Grandview, Missouri, went to UMKC. I didn't go to college to get a degree or an education per se. I was recruited like an athlete, but I was a debater. So I had the freedom, since I didn't go for a particular profession, I had the freedom to explore the curriculum pretty broadly, though I kept my focus in writing. Writing, like I said, that's my nature, that's my passion. Teaching is my best skill. So Um, I debated and I started modeling in, I don't know, the eighth or the ninth grade. And so that was kind of like my little side making money gig. But it was cool because I was smart. So, I was able to build myself a pretty nice little side hustle business in runway modeling. And that's what led, if I remember correctly, that's what led to my first real all in teaching gig, because I started teaching at a modeling school. I was hacked off that we weren't given enough information to be able to do the job really well. And that bugged me, because if I'm not at the highest level, if I feel like I have more to bring, I want to do that. So I started teaching runway modeling, because so many girls, they could get down to the end and back, but they had no finesse. They didn't understand how to move a garment or how to move your body to show a garment. It just bugged me. So I started teaching that, and that led to teaching, um, makeup for photography and nutrition. So that's my nutrition thread. I started teaching girls how to build a good physique without starving yourself, without doing stupid things, but how to get your body, how you wanted to look, but in a healthy way. And in, I want to say 1990, I think. Now I'm dating myself. Through my then college boyfriend's mother, I met the man who is my partner now. So that all goes way back. But we met through building a nutritional business. He was really into sports and coaching with his family at that time. It took us 25 years to get together. So that's a whole nother story. Um, but, and I was into teaching girls, how to be healthy and look the way they wanted to look. And so we partnered up and went after high schools. And so we started counseling high school athletes, like wrestlers, cheerleaders, whoever, how to be strong, how to be healthy, but how to build your body to what it needed to be for whatever your sport or your athletics were. So um, while I was doing that essentially taught me how to build my first business. It was Gary Norris and I sitting down for lunch every week saying, okay, we need this many leads, we need this many sales, and just going through it. Well, as life does, I was handed my first cancer diagnosis, and I didn't have insurance. I was a young woman just out of college doing what you do, and I needed a surgery. And so he graciously basically bought out my side, and I had to basically left the business and had to take care of myself for a while, and did that. And so let's see. Yeah, then it was in that middle period there. I was still teaching at the modeling agency, but at that point, I didn't like the management, because now that I was on the inside, right, I wasn't just one of the worker monkeys. I was on the inside, and I saw how things were actually done. And that was the second thing that hacked me off about the industry. So I marched into my executive director's office and I said, either you give me the directorship of the agency or I'm leaving. Well, I was the director the next day. So that's how I started really understanding what goes on in the industry. And I became more and more interested in ways, teaching girls how to be safe and how to insulate themselves from the darker sides of the business. And that was probably my first foray into trafficking. I really started to understand what was happening. I narrowly missed being sent to China and having my passport taken and basically being sold with a group of girls. Fortunately, my mom was like, I just don't think that's a good idea. And we sat down and had a good talk about it. And Danny Boatwright, who was Miss Teen Kansas, I believe, she was on our team. And her mom also was like, this doesn't smell right. And then we later found out that the reason those people had approached the agency was they were looking for girls to traffic. So that's a cause that's near and dear to my heart. And so that thread ties into the self-defense company. But that's later. So I was still working at the agency. I had let the nutritional business go. And a dear, dear friend of mine who was on the debate squad with me at UMKC committed suicide. That rocked my world. That was the moment when I stepped back and I said, I'm not being my best self. I'm in a business that I don't have any respect for. I'm doing the best that I can, for the 200 some girls that I represent, but this is not where my heart is. And so I quit and I just went dark for a while. Literally, I started working 11 to 7 nighttime security. And that's when I started writing my novel. So that was about 1993, I think. And I wrote about 30,000 words of the novel that I picked up when I started my Zettelkasten. So I took a long break. Um, I worked security for quite a while, worked my way up, and ended up becoming an administrator. And and that's when I got the self-defense bug. I was very curious about, what else can I do? How can I bring more of myself to this? So um, I did some private investigations, just kind of exploring stuff. What do I want to do next? I knew the business I didn't want to be in anymore. So what do I want to do next? Well, writing is in my heart. It always has been. So I joined a writers group and I started connecting up with writers who were terrified of public speaking. And I'm like, superpower. So I started a group which was preparing your own work, whether it's poetry, oratory, whatever, preparing your work for public performance. And I started putting on these public performances. And I think I ran my classes for like 8 or 10 weeks. And everybody would write something. Most of it was poetry, but some people would do, an oratory or something. And we would get an audience together and and just have a performance. And so that started to get a lot of traction. It was really cool. And it was so fun. It was one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. Even though I was just volunteering, it was through the university community program. And had a freaking blast just watching people go from meek and terrified to step on the stage to like slam poetry and just really putting it out there. It was so cool. So I was like, okay, I want more of that. So I was involved with the Coalition Against Censorship, and me and my then husband had started, we got together with a lot of people in the community who at that time were publishing zines. And this goes back to my friend who killed himself. The first zine I was ever given was a little uh folded photocopied thing that he gave me, and I'm like, what is this? And it was full of like poetry and graphics, and it was so cool. So I'm like, okay, I want more of that too. So when we started the Underground Symposium, which brought people who created their own little published books and booklets and whatever together from all across the country, was a huge event we put on for years. At that point in time, I was asked to present at a place called the Writers Place, which is the Writers Place. It's an organization for local writers. And someone who was on staff at the Kansas City Art Institute was there and saw my performance and came up to me afterward and said, this is a crazy question. I don't even know if you teach. Would you be willing to teach a class at the Art Institute? And I was like, I hear you, universe. I'm in. So that was how I started teaching over there. And the cool thing was, unlike today, where you're hired on and you're given a curriculum and this is what you're going to teach, I was so fortunate that I was given the freedom to write my own curriculum. So at first, it was just poetry. It was exactly the same thing that I was teaching in the community program. But what I started to notice pretty quickly, and I got to witness in real time, is they stopped teaching students cursive writing. They stopped asking students to handwrite anything. It all went digital. And more, I was getting young people who had no idea how to write a resume, how to build a portfolio, how to approach a gallery as a young artist. They didn't know anything. And I was like, okay, I've got skills. So I changed my curriculum to include professional writing. So we still did the creative stuff, but we started doing professional writing. And to this day, I still have former students contact me because I've got a 16-year span of students now who are all out in the world doing amazing things. And periodically someone will say, I got this job, or I did this show. And it's just so cool to know that, like ripples in a pond, I was able to, send my little minions out there to chase their dreams, and now to see that come back. I've even had some of them who have enrolled in my self-defense classes for their children now, which is just crazy. So I did that. I taught only in the summer semester, which left me the other 9 months of the year to do, what do I want to do next? Well, at that point in time, my partner, he's been a firearms trainer for years. And I had my kids. So my daughter is now, I'm going to get this wrong. Isn't that terrible? I think she's 22 going on 3, and my son's 19 going on 20. So I was, I didn't feel good about, being in security work and doing that stuff when I was having my kids. It didn't fit. So I left my security work and became a mom. And so I mommed full time for about 8 years, I think. And during that time, I had to do something. So I was like, what can I do next? And I was very into art at the time, because obviously teaching at the Art Institute, I kind of caught the bug. And I started painting and drawing again. And the funny thing is, I wasn't writing. So it's interesting how, the journey made a big circle. But I was painting and drawing, and I thought I discovered hand embroidery, and found out, like, over the course of a weekend, that I was really proficient at it. Do I have anything here? I do here. I've got this guy. I don't know if you can see him. That's it's several 100,000 stitches in hand embroidery. Just his nose has 8 feet of thread in it. So that
Wow.
was an Akita, that was our dog.
Oh,
So
awesome.
it's funny because at the end of that weekend, I came home to my family. We were living in Columbia, Missouri at the time, which is a couple hours away. And I came home to my family, and I lost my mom a few months after my daughter was born. So I haven't had my mom in a long time, but she was super crafty as well. And my aunt looked at what I was doing, and I'm like, isn't this cool? I learned this all over the weekend. And she just looked at me and she was like, Pick, you're not learning this. You're remembering it. Your mom taught you to embroider when you were a little girl. So that's when I'm like, okay, universe, I'm listening. So what did I do? I started building classes in embroidery and drawing and painting and all of the creative stuff that I was interested in. And so Freedom of Stitch was my company, and I exhibited my embroidered works and worked with the Missouri Fiber Artists Association, and just went down the art road because it was so easy to do with my kids. And just another happy accident, I went into Joanne craft store to buy thread, and met the education director there. And I happened to have some work with me because I was matching thread colors, and showed her, and she was like, will you come and teach for us and design classes? Okay, universe. So that was my next gig. So I designed jewelry making, embroidery, and painting classes for the Joanne craft stores, the one here near me. And then I also designed for the one in Independence, which is about an hour away. So I did that and just ran my art business, because that worked really well with having kids, way better than punching and kicking and shooting people. So art was way more kid friendly. And so I did that. And then in 2013, we moved out here to the ranch, and he was still teaching firearms classes. And I started helping, because my kids were older, and, now they were getting interested in shooting. And I'm like, okay, so all the art stuff went downstairs. There's still a studio downstairs, but I don't get down there nearly as much as I wish I did. Um, and we were teaching firearms classes, and it was funny because we kept getting the same questions, mostly from women. I'm a nurse, I'm a teacher, I'm a mom. I can't have a firearm with me. What are my options? And we didn't have good answers. So I'm like, okay, So I did my research. I took a couple years and I found the Cobra Defense Systems and loved it. Its whole creation, which we just lost our founder Chris Sutton just recently, which is really tragic. His whole vision was all skill levels, all fitness levels, all levels of knowledge, ages, none of it matters. We teach programs that anyone can do, and we teach to your strengths so that we're going to empower you for what you can do. I loved it. I'm like, that makes sense to me. So that's what we've been doing. I founded the self-defense company and it just took off like crazy. Um, Pretty quickly, because we were working with moms, nurses, etc., so much, that led to school contracts. And in 2018 and 19, I had rolling contracts with every K through high school through college. And I would go in every semester, every quarter, and just roll those students through new programs. It was perfect. And then the world went insane and everybody got sent home. And I realized having my entire business wrapped up in schools was a terrible idea because there was no diversity. So when the world shut down, there went my business. COVID ate it. So it's like, okay, time to regroup. Well, the side thing that's been going on in the background since 2012 is I was running the art business, doing what I was doing, but I was itching to try something different. I just was looking for something. I wasn't done with art, but I was done with my passion being a business because it wasn't fun anymore. So I went to a women's networking event and I met Carrie Bell, who is now my dearest friend. And we hit it off. We were both late. So we're standing in the back, embarrassed because like everybody's doing their thing, and we're like, we're the bad apples. So we just struck up a conversation and started talking. Well, at that point in time, in 2010, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and that will knock the wind out of you. So as I recovered from cancer, I wanted to move my art into something that was more for pleasure, and I was just ready to do something else. And um, I can't explain it. I just met Carrie, and she happened to say, I work at a telecom broker or security company where looking for somebody just for a few hours. She said, do you have a student maybe at the Art Institute who would be interested in a few hours a week of work? And I'm like, what about me? And she's like, you're so overqualified. You don't want to do this. And I'm like, oh, actually, I do. I really do. Because at that point in time, I was ready to get out of the house, spend my time with grown-ups, you know. And so I did. I started working part-time and basically just started to rebuild my life after cancer. My marriage ended, life just takes its own turn. So, like I said, then the cowboy and I, through crazy luck, our paths crossed again. At that point, he was divorced. My marriage had ended. So we were like, well, it only took us 25 years, but let's go. So, we built our firearms business, built our self-defense company. I stayed on at the telecom broker, got my engineering certificate so that I could work on network architecture. I found I have a good mind for it, but it's the same thing. It's taking things apart, breaking them into bite-sized pieces, and sharing it with the user. So what did I do? I built a training portal. I put up classes teaching people how to use their systems, and my lead role, other than support, is I do a lot of training. So teaching has always been the through line. So the turning point for writing was we went elk hunting. It's been 3 autumns ago now. So here I was not a hunter. My mom and my grandma pheasant hunted. I was never really into that as a kid. I just never got the bug, though my family, everybody else did. But he's a lifelong hunter, and so he's like, sheepishly, would you have any interest in going on this elk hunt with me? And I'm like, sure. That's our relationship is do you want to do this? And the other one's like, sure. You want to start a self-defense company? Sure. So we went on this elk hunt. And for reasons, again, I'm listening universe. For reasons I can't explain, I took the those little baby words of that book that I started writing as a security guard in like 19, 90, whatever it was. I took it with me because I wasn't hunting and I thought I'm going to be in a base camp with nothing to do for the entire day except hike and whatever. I thought, I'm going to take this book with me and see if I can just make something out of it. So I got out there. I slept the entire first couple of days. I didn't realize how exhausted and strung out I was until I got out there completely off the grid with nothing but trees and a roaring river. And I'm like, okay, this is good. So I was so fortunate, that I think it's Terry Greer that says the universe sends you the people you need at the time that you need them. So the gal that was our cook is also a guide. She's a backcountry guide, but she volunteered to cook for us. So she stayed in camp. So it was just her and I all day. And after like the third day, fourth day we were there, I had spent the whole day in the tent writing. I mean, I had nothing else to do but think about my story, and it all started to come. So I take my little notes sheepishly over to the coffee tent, the kitchen tent, and I'm like, Kim, I'm writing this story. Could I talk this through with you? Would you just tell me if I'm nuts? Is this interesting? And she's like, sure. What else are we gonna do? We've got 9 hours to sit here. So she graciously listened to this story that I was writing and all these ideas that I had. And now she's become one of my dearest friends. And now she will say she was hooked from the first idea. She was so in. So I had the perfect, gracious beta reader, to talk this idea through with. And she just kept nodding and saying, this is so good. She's like, I can't wait to read this. So that was huge. I came home with pretty much the whole book sketched out. But then she kept nudging me. She's like, this is more than one book. This needs to be a trilogy. I'm like, can I just get the first one done? Well, when I got home, the biggest problem that I had was I had 20 some years of journals and notes and ideas and just crap everywhere. I have a whole bookcase full of journals. I have no idea what's in them, but I'm sure it's all important. And didn't know what to do with it. So at 2 a.m., like you do, I'm on YouTube, note taking organization system, organize a novel, whatever. I'm just searching for any kind of lifeline. And that's when I found Scott Shepard. And from the moment that he, God love him, with his little note cards and, here's what you do. From the first video, I immediately started thinking, this will work for a novel. So everything that he was teaching, I literally binged his videos for days and just internalized all of it. And everything he was teaching and talking about, I was retrofitting for fiction from the first video. I just knew if I sunk my teeth into this system, that it could change everything. And it really did. Without the Zettelkasten system, I sound like a crazy testimonial, but I'm so passionate about it. Without it, I could not have gotten this book written. I couldn't, because it's now, I took that one book and I have now broken it into three. So the beginning is still the beginning. The middle is the second book. And then the third book will be a different ending. So there's no way I could have tracked all of that world building, all of the character development, everything that goes into writing a book. There's no way I could have tracked it because I can focus, but I need structure. And that's what I didn't have. So yeah, so once I got my system built and I installed, my character cards, it's like it takes the worry away. You don't have to worry about how am I going to find something? How am I going to keep track of things? How am I going to stitch pieces together? Because you know where everything is. It's like it's so calming and so soothing to know everything is in the cards. And all I got to do is look at the index to find them. So, um, of course, now that I have this new superpower, the first thing I had to do was figure out how to teach it. How do I share it? So that's what set me down the road of I've got to write a Zettelkasten for fiction book and chronicle how I'm doing and have done it and share that with other people because I know for a fact from my own small group of students that organizing, finding things, and developing ideas is something that every writer struggles with. And I feel like I have a good tool now that I can help with that. So um, we rebuilt the self-defense business kind of along the way. Things are starting to come back now. I'm focusing primarily on lectures and seminars. I don't do hardly any one-on-one or personal training because I'm tired of getting beat up. I'm just done with that. And so segueing into writing and, an information or a knowledge product, it's just all come full circle. So that's a natural transition at just the time that I'm ready for it. And then I will probably continue doing some engineering, maybe in like a part-time way, just because I love it. I love my clients and I just don't want to abandon them. And of course, Carrie, my bestie, still is there, so I can't abandon her entirely. So that's kind of how I've divided up my buckets to get me more in the direction I want to go, which is just writing. So there you go.
Yeah, that was fabulous. I think you just did my job for me. But I do have some follow-up questions on all of that. It was excellent.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, did anyone teach you how to teach or inspire you with that bug of teaching? And then kind of in the same vein, how did you fall in love with learning? Because becoming, I mean, a lot, the common thread through all of that is you were just excited for a new experience. You saw the gaps, that's the entrepreneurial piece. You saw the gap in the way that something was being shared and there was this desire to fill it. So do you have any idea where that came from? Was there anyone that inspired you to
Yeah.
that or anything that inspired you to that?
Mm. Um, that's a good question. I would probably have to say first it would be my mom. My mom was very gracious as a teacher. She was a reader, she was a writer. She wanted very much to share that. And so she always encouraged me as a writer. And I think it's just my nature. When I find something that serves me well and that I love, the first thing I want to do is share it with somebody else that might find it useful. So then secondly, I would have to say daddy, my father. He my dad's old side of the family is Cherokee, and he was the shaman for the Sac Fox and Osage tribe in southern Missouri. So daddy was basically an Indian, and he did birth ceremonies, death ceremonies, all of those tribal things. And he was always a teacher and very gracious with his time and an avid reader. Right up into his death, every couple of weeks, I was sending him books. So I would have to say my parents. And as an only child, my books were my best friends. And so learning was my best friend from as early as I can remember. Even before I was old enough to go to school, I would gather up piles of books and walk around the circumference of our entire house and pretend I was going to school. So yeah, I think it's just who I am. And then my debate coaches, my high school coach, Yvonne Sutter, was amazing. And my college coach, Linda Collier. I would have to say my debate coaches, if anybody instilled the value of a great teacher, it would be them because they literally changed my life.
So did you get to experience any of those ceremonies with your father growing up?
Not growing up. As a young person, my parents divorced when I was 9, I think. Daddy never really got over that. He was a terrible alcoholic for years. And we essentially went our separate ways. He had to move out of the city when I was in middle school, I think is when he left because he just needed to not be around, the bad influences of a big city. And so he moved to southern Missouri, literally to the middle of nowhere in a cabin and put himself back together. So I was mad at him for 40 years. So I really didn't, I wanted none of that. And after I had my own kids, and I don't know if other people share this experience, but when I became a parent, I became a lot more forgiving of parents. So I started to rethink my relationship with daddy. And I'm so grateful that I did, because I wrote him a letter, gosh, I don't know, 10 years ago, and just basically said, I forgive you. Whatever you are upset about, punishing yourself, regretting, let it go. I'm grown up, I'm healthy, I've got two perfect children, I have a great family, my life is awesome. I forgive you. Parenting is freaking hard. And it's funny, after he passed, I found a Bible in his bedside table, and the only thing in that Bible was my letter. He must have read it 1,000 times. And so I knew, I was so grateful to have that relationship back, because then I got to have my dad for, the last 10 years. He died Valentine's Day year before last. So, I was just so grateful that I had grown up enough and dealt with my crap, that we were so close at the end, and I got to have him back, and I got to have that time. So he performed the marriage to my me and my former husband, my son's father, which was awesome. But and I did attend, I don't know, I was in college, I think, and a friend and I went down to like a celebration of life ceremony, which was just so cool. It was kind of a drum circle, I guess you'd call it. So I did do that, which I was always grateful that I did that. But I don't think I ever attended anything else that he did, though we talked every week, and we're just super, super close. So yeah, so watching him, or talking to him about the way that he kind of shepherded his own community, that had a deep impact on me, because when I went down after his passing, I didn't pass a person. I mean, I went into the dollar store and was standing at the counter, and I was checking out, and I said to the woman, I said, I was fumbling with getting my wallet, I don't know, something. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I just lost my dad, and I'm still kind of shaken. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. Who was he? And I said, it was Larry Crowder. And she goes, Indian Larry was your dad? And I'm like, that, yeah. They saw, I mean, I can go anywhere. Everybody knew him. He was such a figure, and he was 6'6", and when I was a kid, kids used to walk up to him and say, Mommy, it's Jesus, because he had, long hair and a beard and super thin, he had a hawk nose. So, he was larger than life for me. So I always wanted to be that kind of leader that could just share what I know with people if I think it could be of value. I think it's just in my blood.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that may connect to the next question I wanted to ask you, which was just about strength and where that came from. I
Mm,
mean, the strength to forgive. But I mean, you talked about the strength of going counterculture in the fashion industry. The strength to walk into that office of your boss and be like, either put me in charge or I'm out. Surviving cancer
yeah.
twice. I mean, not running away from the fashion industry after the
Mm,
the trafficking scare. Losing a friend to suicide, fighting against censorship, which you just sort of like
yeah.
breezed over. That, and then
Yeah.
even just that
There was
ability to
that.
say sure to whatever comes your way. Where do you know where that came from? Is it kind of the same source? Or and also
Um,
how do you reflect, how do you move through those things? Do you have any tips for people if when they're struggling in a tough situation?
ooh, that's good. This is good. You're making me work here. Um, well, that it's a couple of things, I guess. They say that I did a lot of reading of, mothers who've lost their mothers, you know, mothers and grown women, who have had that kind of experience with your parent, whether it's alcoholism or drugs or whatever. So I did a lot of work trying to understand. I try not to believe that people are just innately evil and want to hurt you, though I have discovered actually there kind of are those people. And I just wanted to understand. And I think I just decided I didn't want to carry that burden anymore. And I came to the realization that I can control this. I don't have to be angry at him anymore. I can decide to come from a place of love and forgiveness and not have to be angry, because it takes a lot of work to be mad. That was a huge lesson for me. What once you figure out I don't have to carry this anymore, I can shift it into something that serves me, that felt better. And so for that piece, I would say it was making that realization that he's human too, and he's suffering too, and I have the ability to to soothe some of that suffering with forgiveness. That felt really good, so I leaned into that. um with cancer, my partner played a huge role in that. He has had cancer many times and beat it. And before I went into my surgery, I had a phone conversation with him because we weren't seeing each other. Were just talking on the phone. And he said, the most important thing about cancer is you control it, it does not control you. And I thought, okay, I can lean into that. So I did everything that was within my control. I completely changed my diet. I worked hard on building my strength back and recovering from the surgery. And, so I'm a, I mean, you get beat down, and bad things happen. And for me, I try to approach it, I go through the process, whether that's grief or anger or whatever, but I'm just wired then to look at it and go, okay, how do I get a handle on this? What can I do? And that very much comes from my mom. She was a geriatric nurse and sat with many people as they passed, as did I, often helping her. And you just learn. I mean, I learned from a very early age that life is a gift, and either you choose to make it an adventure, or you choose to hide and not, or somewhere on the continuum. And very early on, I I just decided I wanted the adventure. I didn't want to be afraid to try something. I I was not a martial artist. I was not former military. I was certainly no kind of badass. No, I was the original 98-pound weakling. I don't like to sweat. But let's start a self-defense company. Sure. I know I can learn and teach anything. So that's one of my biggest triumphs is if I can learn and teach that, and have students that walk away feeling empowered and standing taller, and using their voice. If I can make that kind of a change in any way, whether it's teaching writing or self-defense or embroidery, whatever it is, I don't care. If I can give that gift to someone, that's what's driven every decision that I've made. So I don't know. In terms of strength, I made a decision early on. I could either be broken or afraid of things, or I could choose to turn them into such a way that they served me. And so that's just what I've always done. My
Yeah.
Aunt Edna would say it's her influence.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, no, that's a very stoic mindset. The Stoics would talk about, when
Mm,
something
yeah,
happens, when you lose someone, take the time to grieve, but don't get
yeah.
stuck there. So there's going to
Mhm.
be a time to move on from it. So yeah, and all right, so I
Yeah.
have a lighter question I can ask you now.
Okay.
Is that selfishly, I'm interested, in the self-defense side of things. So I've done the martial
Mhm.
arts for over 25 years now. And it is interesting. We actually lost the founder of our system a year and a half ago. And there's been
Wow.
multiple, I think there's like a shift that's happening, or just
Mm,
that generation that kind of brought the martial arts and self-defense
yeah.
into
Yeah.
this country. They're all just kind of aging out at this
Yeah.
point. So there's been a
Yeah.
lot of transitions and a lot of systems. But it sounds like the what you teach is more practically based rather than rooted
Yes.
in a martial arts style. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about it? I'm just
Mhm.
curious.
Yeah. The Cobra systems, Chris Sutton, our founder, did come from a martial arts background, but he was also a cop, and he worked like the super high security prison beat where you couldn't take a weapon in. All you had was yourself. So he learned firsthand the kinds of things that a violently aggressive person does or will do. And so in his mind, he started putting together, what are the countermeasures? What are the pre-attack indicators? He started piecing that puzzle together pretty early. So when he decided to break away and start the self-defense company, he knew he did not want it to be martial arts based. It could be taught in a martial arts center, but he was adamant that this needed to be a program because there is lots of great martial arts training already. He didn't want to rehash that. He wanted to provide something that somebody of all ages, all skill levels, all fitness, the average soccer mom, you know, could do to defend herself. And so it's extremely practical. And that's what drew me to it. Because had it been martial arts, I'd have been like, I saw my son get a black belt. I want nothing to do with that. So the fact that it came from practical applications of, very rudimentary gross motor functions, that all made sense to me. So that's why I chose it.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. So now to do a pivot to one other selfish question that I'd love to hear about, because I think there's a lot of similarities in I think the things that we like. I've always loved teaching. I also love organization and rules. That's kind of what keeps it all in check. So I love, as I'm watching your videos with the Zettelkasten stuff, I love all the highlighting in different colors and the coordination to keep it all organized. So I'm curious how you organize. Oh, look at all those pens. I'm curious how you organize your time and your work. So you've got multiple irons in the fire, and I believe you leave for. You were talking about doing NaNoWriMo. I think that's how you say it. The National Writing Month. I'm forgetting the November
Novel writing.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you like leave for a month and just go write, which is awesome. So how do you organize your time and your work? Are there any little productivity tips or tricks or just anything like that? Because I love productivity and
Yeah, yeah,
organization.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm very fortunate that I have control of my time and my work. It's not like I have to physically be at a desk at a certain time. With that said, I probably, I built my perfect library here at the ranch. So I have a space that I love so much. I don't want to be anyplace else, which can be a bad thing. Um, so I try to be at my desk by, between 7 and 8 in the morning. I generally wake up for reasons I can't explain between 4 and 5. I think as you get older, you just sleep less, which is kind of tragic because sleep is my favorite thing. But so those early morning hours are when I work on my story in my head. So when I get to my desk, I jot down my ideas or if I've worked something out. So that's kind of my time. Then I am available by phone, usually from about 8:30 to about, I don't know, somewhere around 3, 4, 5, however busy the day is. Because I still provide network support. So I it's not that I have to be, physically in an office or whatever, but I do need to be available, for my team. So right now that still kind of takes priority, but I'm fortunate enough that if I can carve out pockets of time, I can carve out a 90-minute lunch hour and, get whatever I'm working on done. So, if I'm writing curriculum, if I need to do some videos, if whatever, I just fit those into the pockets of the day. Now, my weekends are primarily spent writing now because I don't know, I'm about 70,000 words into the novel, so I'm almost to the end of it. So I just try to be really stingy with my time. I guess if I had to wrap it up into one concept, I don't leave the house unless I have to. I do have an office about 15 minutes from here, which I absolutely adore. I love being in at the office, but so many people went to work remotely. It can be lonely there. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to be lonely, I might as well be in the library, which is my happy place anyway. So I automated a lot of things that made a difference. Like I stopped shopping for groceries. I have a personal shopper now that does that, and I just go pick them up. That's huge. I didn't realize how much time I lose just at the grocery store. It's ridiculous. And of course, my son, he's a power lifter, so he eats like more food than anybody I've ever seen. So I spend a lot of time shopping at the grocery store. So just things like that, anything that I could automate, I did. Then, you know, my guy likes to hunt and camp. So when we go do that, usually we go for a couple of weeks at the beginning of November. Now, novel writing month is the whole month of November, and we usually have a hunt trip like the first 10 days. So that's 10 days of dedicated writing I can do, which is critical. If I could give a piece of advice, and this is where I have to tell Kathleen, my heart writer partner, to cover her ears because her course is for people that are time pressed. So writing in small increments. But I have to say, if you as a writer can sequester yourself for a period of days where the only thing you have to think about is eating, sleeping, and writing, it is a game changer because that's what changed it for me. Having those 10 days out there with nothing but a river and a camp, that made the difference because I didn't have to mom, I didn't have to work, I didn't have to do chores. It really changed my life because it gave me the jump start that I needed. And then I came home and found the Zettelkasten like magic. I'm like, okay, universe, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. And then I started getting all my stuff in order, and it's just been a roller coaster from there. So if you have a big project, give yourself some sequestered time to hatch it. Get your organization system in order so that you know where things are and you can find them when you have those pockets of time to work. Too often you're going to sit down and write, and it takes you 15 minutes to find the notes and get the notes together and remember where you were. And, I just grab a pack of cards and lay them out and start writing. I don't have to go through all that other stuff that it wastes my precious time. So I'd have to say, yeah, get yourself a system, commit to the system. Zettelkasten is the best, and find dedicated time to hatch your passions because it's too easy for them. I'll work on that next week. I always used to think to myself, I'll write my novel when I'm retired. How stupid is that? I saw myself as a little gray-haired lady, sitting with my little word processor, like Angela Lansbury in Murder, She Wrote, typing out my books. And, you turn 50 and you're like, crap, like I'm that person now. So time to get cracking. So yeah, being aware of time passing, that's a doozy that'll get you. So that's motivating. I'm just grateful to wake up every day.
It sounds like you've constructed your environment to make it as easy as possible to just do the things you're passionate about. Yeah, and I
Yes,
I
remove
think
all distractions.
yes. Yeah, and I think pairing what Kathleen's doing, I interviewed her a few episodes
Mhm.
ago, pairing what she's doing with that chunk of time. If not everyone can swing it, but if you can, if you do have a support network, even if it's just for a weekend, and I like that
Yes.
to giving yourself this space to hatch the creative project, and then from there, I think that's where Kathleen's system of how to tap into it quickly, like reconnect to it quickly. So if you take the chunk of time to get yourself set up and hatch, I love that term, hatch the creativity, then you can go into the time pressed part of it. But it'll definitely get you going
Absolutely.
faster if you can create the
Yeah.
environment. Yeah. Awesome. So I think that's a good bridge to jump into your work a little bit. So tell us a little bit more about just give us the overview of the system because I know you have YouTube videos to teach fiction writers
Mhm.
how to create their Zettelkasten system. So give us a
Mhm.
little bit of what your work is now and kind of the journey that you take people on.
Um, so once I wrapped my head around how the system works, and I immediately saw how it could apply to my novel, and I started making good headway. Of course, I'm always keeping good notes because I chronicle everything. So I'm thinking, okay, how can I teach this? How can I share it? And that's where Zettelkasten for fiction, where imagination finds order, came from, because that's what it did for me. I have all the ideas. I can tell stories all day long. My problem is ordering all of those ideas into something that's going to be satisfying for a reader. Well, that's a problem every writer wrestles with. I've written tons of nonfiction. I've written tons of debate cases and arguments. I know how to break something down and argue my case. So why not do the same thing with fiction? I mean, it just made sense to me. So that's where my course started being built from. It's funny, I often say, there they go. I need to get out front because I'm their leader. My course was totally student led. It was just people asking me questions like this, well, how do you develop a character? I'm like, okay, give me a day and I'll tell you. So I would sketch it all out and put up a module in a course or put up a video. And then, it would be the next question. Well, how do you open your story? How do you write your inciting incident? Okay, give me a day and I'll tell you. So then I go and, do the video or whatever, write it out, whatever. Um, and pretty quickly, those questions, just out of other writers' curiosity, stacked up into something that in my mind started to resemble a course. So then, of course, I've got Kathleen, the angel on my shoulder, saying, you need to put out a course. So that's when we hatched our diabolical plan, which is a publishing co-op. So it's funny because after I made really good traction with my novel and I started putting together what could be a nonfiction book to teach how I've done what I've done, I emailed Terry Greer and I said, is there a possibility that maybe we could publish books? And he's like, well, I think maybe something like that could be in the future. He's like, let's put a pin in that and we'll talk about that again. And it was like a month later that Kathleen and I in our writing group were talking, and she said, I have this idea about a publishing co-op. And I'm like, okay, universe, I'm listening. It's like God descending in full regalia saying, you need to do this. So that's when Kathleen and I teamed up. So the the projects kind of dovetail together. So I will continue building my course for fiction writers, how to use the Zettelkasten system to complete a fiction project. And my course will live on our co-op platform, along with lots of other courses for, different kinds of writing, different kinds of books. We envision having a lot of different readers, writers, booksellers, people who support books like designers, blurb writers, copywriters. It will be a platform that will have a home for everyone that is passionate about books and writing. So it's just sort of developed, as people ask questions and we start brainstorming, it's grown up into, the novel that I'm writing in that project, and then teaching other writers how to do what I've done and what she's done, and then giving that gift in education.
That's fabulous. Yeah, I'm really excited to watch this all grow and
Yeah.
blossom over the next year or so. So what are some of your
Yeah.
favorite stories of transformation that you've seen your students go through, or whether it was in the writing course that you did at the college, or through even just through your YouTube videos, if you've had anyone reach out?
Yeah. Actually, probably the most satisfying thing is watching people learn to present their own work. I've never been afraid to step on a stage, get in front of an audience, give a speech, give a talk, do a panel. I've just never been afraid of that. I can't say why. I'm just not wired that way. So, um, being able to take a student who's absolutely terrified to open their mouth in front of people and turn them into someone who is confident, who has great body language, and who's willing to share their work in that way, that's definitely the most satisfying thing for me. And then, of course, along with that is taking them from an idea, a little spark of a poem or a story or whatever, and shepherding them through the process to completing something. That's definitely the other most satisfying thing. And I mean, I've done it probably thousands of times now, taking somebody that thinks maybe they have a good idea, but doesn't know how to tackle it and unpack it and develop it. or somebody who is terrified to even talk about their idea and turning them into someone who is passionate about sharing it and who then completes the project. I love that. I love it so much. And that's what I want to do.
That's awesome. And as I was looking at your bio and kind of starting to plan and prepare for this interview, all of the disparate pieces, I was wondering what the thread was. Like, especially that as a
Mm-hmm.
martial artist, some of it I was like nutrition, yes, I could even see the
Yeah.
jump into writing, but like the fashion was like, how's that gonna fit in? But that's still, creating,
Mm-hmm.
getting people to connect, to step out with confidence and just connect deeper to themselves. It
Yeah.
all, yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool how it all interconnects. Well, we
Mm-hmm.
see, this is what I
Mm-hmm.
said at the beginning. I try to go 30 to 45 minutes, but when the conversation's going good, so we could keep talking for much longer than an hour, but I'm gonna jump into my not so
Mm-hmm.
rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Uh, and
That's why I said you're friendly fire.
yeah, there you go. So I'm gonna actually ask you the one I usually ask second first because I think it connects to a little bit to what you were just talking about. But what's one thing that you would suggest to our listeners that they can apply in their life today? And especially like the common thread, like we just talked about, is like bringing in that confidence. So I don't know if there's something in that realm, or it could be about writing, it could be about self-defense, it could be about anything. But what's one thing that someone could start doing today to help move themselves forward?
Um, I would say probably, I'd say probably a couple of things. The first one is to look at your attitude and be honest with yourself about it. I spent a lot of time, mostly when I was younger, probably before I had kids. I spent a lot of time um, just not in real self-reflection. I just kind of went about my day. I was a ramrod leaving people in my wake. I just didn't think a lot about the things that I did or why I just didn't really do a lot. I was reflective, but not in the way that I am now. And the reason I say that is because it led me to being much more forgiving and kinder, which is a good shift. And it led me to cultivating like an ethic of resilience. If I could have one word, on my headstone, it would be that I was resilient, that I was able, to bounce back, to not be fearful, to approach things with more of a curiosity and and how can I transform things so that they serve me and let go of things that don't. I think if you can cultivate an attitude of resilience, it will serve you well. And then I think some form of journaling. Um, Terry Greer launched his email sequence, and I've been very curious to see what he does. And his last email, he talked about journaling and how seeing his own handwriting on the page was so transformational. And I agree with that 100% because I started my first journal in the 6th grade as an assignment in an English class, and I've kept journals ever since. I mean, I have hundreds of journals going back to the 6th grade. And, I can go back 10 years, 20 years, and look at what I've written. And I immediately recall, where my head was at, what my goals were, how I course corrected and grew as a person and, took on challenges. Having that through line is just super valuable. If for no other reason, you can look back and realize what a dork you were, just writing pages and pages about this guy or that thing or whatever. You're just like, oh man, this is never going to see the public ever. So just cultivate that habit of being honest with yourself on the page. I think that's why Haley's soul cards using the Zettelkasten for personal development, I'm so excited to see where she goes with that. Because she's doing exactly what I would say, if you can use your cards in that way, that's a great application. we're so lucky to have such an amazing group of all of us because we've all taken this one system and it's gone in so many different directions, but they serve us so well. So even if you're not into the Zettelkasten itself, that habit of reflecting on the page so that you can look objectively at yourself and your attitudes and grow the ones that serve you and phase out the ones that don't. I think that's why we're here is, to grow spiritually, to grow mentally, and to become the best versions of ourselves, because that's how we all help each other. And I think that's why we're here.
Awesome. Wonderful answer. All right. Next question is, what should people look for in someone who does what you do? So how do you find a writer's coach or even just a course on writing? What should people look for as they're sifting through all of the options that are out there?
I would say you have to resonate with the instructor. I've had writing teachers that I was just like, for some reason, they just didn't ring my bell. Just pass them by. You have to, writing is a very personal experience. So, especially if if you're writing fiction, if you're taking something out of your imagination and offering it on the page, that's a very intimate experience. And so you need to work with someone that understands that. Too often editors they're very mechanical, reject, reject, cut this, cut that. They don't take into account that there's an actual human on the other side of that with feelings and aspirations and dreams. And, so you need to be a good fit with that person. And then you have to be honest about whether or not their approach suits you. I've oh gosh, I am embarrassed to say how many writing books I've purchased over the years. And often I would try to force myself into their program or their process, thinking, oh, well, they're the expert, they know better than me. And I would try to force myself into that lane. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. So be discerning about how they teach and if that program can serve you so that you just don't waste time and money. There are people who are just serial class takers and they just keep taking the course and taking the course and they never do the writing. Well, you need to look at a resource as, does it inspire me? Does it totally light me up and get me excited to put the words on the page? If yes, that's the right thing for you. If it's just another program and there's 148 steps and those steps don't get the words on the page, all you've done is 148 steps. So you have to be honest about whether it's going to work for you and get the work done.
That's good advice for writing courses and any other course that someone's looking to
Mm-hmm.
learn.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Second to last question. What's the most valuable lesson you've learned through your entrepreneurial journey? You've shared a lot, but if you had to pick one, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned?
Um, the most important thing in any endeavor is momentum. It is so easy to think yourself out of action. And I'm the worst offender. I can think and workshop and develop an idea to death, literally, and never make any progress. All of my best progress has always come because I took an action. I made the call, I sent the email, I went to the meeting when I met Carrie Bell and started working in networking. I felt horrible that day. I did not want to go. I had almost talked myself out of it, but I was very unhappy at home and I couldn't bear to be there anymore. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put on the thing, put on the clothes, and I'm going to go and do the thing. And it changed my life. So every single time I would say, do the thing, even if it's a tiny thing. Everything, every action has a reaction and that generates energy. And the more of those little things that you can do to give yourself momentum and energy, the better any endeavor will go. And then, secondly, I would say you've got to have a tribe. Even if it's one person cheering for you, find people that support what you want to do so they can lift you up.
I love that answer. All right, most important question. How can people connect with you if they want to learn more?
It's easy. It's victoriacrowder.com. Just go to my site, sign up for my email. I don't send regular emails. I don't send automated emails. I reach out periodically and just touch base with people, maybe share what I'm working on or what's coming. So, don't expect to get dumped into a funnel and get 48,000 emails from me because I don't do that. I may do that later, but I don't do that now. So, yeah, victoriacrowder.com.
And is your YouTube channel on there too? Is there a link?
Um, there's if there's not, there will be soon. But you can find me. I think it's at YouTube. It's either my name, Victoria Crowder, or you can find me as the anti-novelist.
Okay, yeah, and
I
I'll
think that's the title.
definitely, yeah, I'll put that in the
Yeah.
description of the episode too, so and on the YouTube channel so people have it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful.
Oh,
It was
thank
great to hear
you.
your story. And keep being you. You're doing really cool stuff in the world.
Thank you so much. I so much appreciate it.